What if some of the most powerful healing foods in history were hidden in plain sight for thousands of years? Long before modern medicine existed, ancient civilizations relied on specific foods not only to survive, but to restore strength, protect the body, and recover from illness naturally. These foods were carried through deserts, stored during famines, and treated as sacred gifts passed from one generation to another. And the strange part is this: many of those same foods still exist today, sitting quietly in kitchens and markets around the world, while most people have no idea how valuable they once were. This changes everything. For centuries, biblical cultures believed certain foods contained extraordinary properties connected to vitality, endurance, and healing. What's fascinating is that modern science has started revisiting many of these ancient ingredients, and researchers are discovering compounds, nutrients, and protective effects that sound surprisingly close to what ancient people described thousands of years ago. But not every secret was meant to survive. Some of these foods became symbols of wealth and survival. Others were quietly forgotten as industrialized diets replaced ancient traditions. And one food later in this video, the mysterious seed revealed in topic 7, carried such a legendary reputation that people once believed it could help the body in ways almost impossible to explain. Few people still know this. Then comes the final revelation in topic 10, a fruit so deeply connected to life, renewal, and abundance that entire civilizations treated it as sacred. Now pause for a second. Think about how different modern eating has become. Artificial ingredients, processed meals, endless chemicals. Yet ancient societies without laboratories or pharmaceutical companies managed to preserve health using simple natural foods that still exist today. Could they have understood something we forgot? As we go deeper into this journey, you'll discover foods connected to survival, resilience, energy, protection, and restoration. Some were consumed by warriors before battle. Others were given to the weak during times of exhaustion, and a few were considered so valuable that losing access to them meant danger for entire communities. This was never supposed to be forgotten. If you enjoy ancient wisdom, hidden history, and forgotten healing traditions, stay with us until the end, because the final foods on this list become more surprising with every step. And the very first food was once called liquid gold for a reason. Imagine living in a world where one single food was considered so valuable that people risked traveling across dangerous deserts just to obtain it. Long before refined sugar existed, honey was more than a sweet substance. In biblical times, it represented life, abundance, strength, and even healing itself. Ancient travelers carried it during exhausting journeys because it could restore energy quickly and preserve food for long periods. Warriors consumed it before battle. Families stored it for survival. And in many cultures, honey was seen as a gift directly connected to divine provision. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. Modern science now understands that raw honey contains natural compounds capable of protecting and supporting the body in remarkable ways. Unlike artificial sweeteners created in factories, ancient honey came directly from nature, untouched and powerful. It contains antioxidants, enzymes, and antibacterial properties that ancient civilizations could observe, even without laboratories or scientific instruments. This changes everything. There are records showing that honey was often used on wounds and infections because people noticed something strange. It seemed to help protect damaged skin naturally. Thousands of years later, researchers discovered that certain types of honey create an environment where harmful bacteria struggle to survive. What ancient people called a sacred remedy may have had biological effects science is only now fully exploring, and the symbolism surrounding honey made it even more powerful. Entire regions were described as lands flowing with milk and honey, a phrase connected to prosperity, nourishment, and survival. Few people still realize that honey was never viewed as ordinary food. It was survival technology from the ancient world. Now pause for a second. Think about how modern diets replaced natural foods with heavily processed alternatives filled with chemicals and artificial ingredients. Yet one of the oldest foods in human history continues to survive almost unchanged. Bees still create it the same way they did thousands of years ago. That alone is incredible. Some ancient healers even believed honey could help restore strength after periods of weakness or exhaustion. And while they didn't understand nutrients the way modern science does, they clearly observed the results with their own eyes. But honey was only the beginning. Because the next biblical food carried a reputation so intense that entire civilizations believed it could protect the body from invisible dangers, and its smell alone made enemies fear it. What kind of food was considered so powerful that entire ancient communities depended on it during times of sickness and survival? Garlic may seem ordinary today, but in biblical and ancient cultures, it carried a reputation that bordered on legendary. Workers, travelers, soldiers, and healers all understood something about garlic that modern society almost forgot. It wasn't just food, it was protection. Its strong smell alone became symbolic of strength and defense. Ancient people believed garlic could help the body resist weakness, harsh environments, and hidden dangers that could not be seen with the human eye. And strangely enough, modern science would later discover natural sulfur compounds inside garlic that researchers now associate with immune support and protective effects throughout the body. Few people still know this. For thousands of years, garlic was consumed before long journeys and periods of hard labor because people noticed it seemed to sustain energy and endurance. Some ancient writings even describe workers eating garlic daily while building massive structures under brutal conditions. They believed it helped maintain strength when the body was under pressure. Now pause for a second. Ancient civilizations had no understanding of bacteria or viruses. They had no microscopes. Yet somehow, they repeatedly returned to the same natural foods for protection and survival. Garlic became one of the most trusted foods across multiple empires for a reason. Modern studies now show garlic contains compounds released when it is crushed or cut, creating natural chemical reactions that may support circulation and defense systems inside the body. What ancient healers observed through experience may not have been superstition after all. This was never supposed to be forgotten. And while garlic became feared for its smell, another biblical food became worshipped for its richness, a golden liquid so valuable that it fueled kingdoms, healed skin, lit temples, and became one of the most sacred symbols of abundance in the ancient world. And what comes next is even more surprising. Imagine a single liquid so valuable that ancient civilizations treated it like treasure. Olive oil was not simply used for cooking. In biblical times, it symbolized purity, healing, blessing, wealth, and survival itself. Kings were anointed with it. Lamps were fueled by it. Families survived harsh seasons because of it. And in many ancient regions, olive oil became more precious than gold. This changes everything. The olive tree itself was viewed as a miracle of endurance. These trees survived brutal heat, dry climates, and generations of conflict while continuing to produce fruit year after year. Ancient people saw this as a symbol of resilience and long life, and the oil extracted from those olives became one of the foundation foods of entire civilizations. But here is where things become fascinating. Modern science now recognizes olive oil as one of the richest natural sources of healthy fats and protective plant compounds. Researchers studying long-living populations repeatedly found olive oil at the center of their diets. Ancient people may not have understood antioxidants or inflammation, but they clearly understood the visible effects of this powerful food. In biblical cultures, olive oil was also applied directly to the skin because people noticed its soothing and protective qualities. Travelers used it under harsh desert conditions. Healers used it during physical recovery. And families stored it carefully, because losing access to olive oil during difficult times could become dangerous. Now think about that. A food respected for thousands of years across multiple civilizations is still considered one of the most valuable natural foods today. Very few modern foods can say the same. And yet, despite all its history, olive oil was only part of a much bigger system of survival foods hidden inside ancient traditions. Because the next biblical food helped entire groups survive long desert journeys where ordinary people would collapse from exhaustion. And this is where things get strange. Picture endless desert landscapes where survival depended entirely on what you carried with you. In those brutal conditions, one fruit became essential for life itself: dates. Small, sweet, and incredibly powerful, dates were one of the most important survival foods in the biblical world. Travelers relied on them. Traders carried them across dangerous routes. Entire communities survived because of them. At first glance, dates seem simple. But ancient civilizations understood something remarkable about them. They provided quick energy, lasted long periods without spoiling, and could sustain the body during intense physical exhaustion. In harsh environments where food was scarce, dates became a lifeline. This changes everything. Modern science now explains why dates were so valuable. They contain natural sugars combined with fiber, minerals, and nutrients that provide fast but steady energy. Ancient travelers may not have understood biology, but they understood survival. They knew dates could restore strength when the body was weak. And there's another fascinating detail. Date palm trees were considered symbols of life and resilience because they thrived where many other plants could not survive. In dry regions with extreme heat, these trees continued producing nourishing fruit year after year. To ancient people, that almost seemed supernatural. Few people realize how important dates became during times of famine and migration. Some ancient communities stored massive quantities because they knew survival could depend on them. Now pause for a second. Imagine trying to cross burning desert terrain with limited water and almost no food. Most modern processed snacks would fail quickly under those conditions. Yet dates remained one of the most reliable foods in human history. That alone says something powerful. But the next food on this list carried a reputation connected not only to strength, but also to wisdom, prosperity, and hidden nourishment known by ancient elites. And very few people still understand why. What kind of fruit was once associated with kings, prosperity, and hidden wisdom? In the ancient biblical world, figs were far more than a simple food. They represented abundance, nourishment, and survival during uncertain times. Entire families depended on fig harvests, and in some regions, dried figs became one of the most valuable foods people could store for long journeys and harsh seasons. But here's the strange part. Figs spoil quickly when fresh, yet once dried, they could last for incredibly long periods while still providing concentrated nourishment. Ancient travelers understood this well. They carried figs across deserts, through trade routes, and during migrations because this fruit provided energy in a compact form that was easy to preserve. This changes everything. In biblical history, figs often appeared as symbols of peace and stability. To sit under the fig tree represented safety, prosperity, and protection. That symbolism was not accidental. A healthy fig harvest could mean survival for an entire community. Modern science now reveals something fascinating about figs. They contain fiber, minerals, and plant compounds connected to digestive health and natural body support. Ancient people may not have understood nutrients scientifically, but they clearly recognized how figs affected strength, recovery, and daily endurance. And then there's something even more surprising. Some ancient healers reportedly used figs in physical recovery practices because they observed visible effects on the body. Whether through nutrition or natural compounds, figs earned a reputation that survived for centuries across multiple civilizations. Now pause for a second. Think about how unusual it is for one fruit to remain respected for thousands of years without disappearing from human diets. Most ancient foods faded away. Figs survived. Few people still understand why. And while figs became symbols of prosperity, the next biblical food was surrounded by mystery, royalty, and even fear. Ancient cultures believed it represented life itself, and this is where the story becomes even more powerful. Imagine opening a fruit so unusual that ancient civilizations treated it as a symbol of power, life, and immortality. The pomegranate was unlike anything people had seen before. Hidden beneath its tough exterior were hundreds of deep red seeds, almost jewel-like in appearance, leading many ancient cultures to associate it with abundance and vitality. But this fruit carried meanings far beyond symbolism. In biblical and ancient traditions, pomegranates were connected to prosperity, sacred ceremonies, and long life. Their image appeared in temples, royal decorations, and sacred garments. To ancient people, this was not random decoration. The pomegranate represented fertility, renewal, and the mysterious ability of life to continue even under harsh conditions. This was never supposed to be forgotten. Modern science later discovered that pomegranates contain powerful antioxidants and natural plant compounds that researchers now study for their protective effects on the body. Ancient healers could not explain molecules or cellular stress, but they repeatedly returned to this fruit for a reason. And here's what makes this even stranger. The pomegranate tree itself survives in difficult climates where many plants struggle. Year after year, it continues producing vibrant fruit filled with hundreds of seeds. To ancient societies, that level of resilience almost seemed supernatural. Now pause for a second. How many foods from the ancient world are still studied by scientists thousands of years later. Very few. Yet pomegranates continue attracting attention because their nutritional profile appears unusually rich compared to many modern processed foods. Some researchers even call them one of the most protective fruits found in nature. That alone is remarkable, but what comes next may be the most mysterious food on this entire list. A tiny seed surrounded by ancient legends so powerful that people once believed it could help protect the body from nearly every kind of weakness imaginable. Few people still know this, and the deeper you go into its history, the stranger it becomes. What if one of the most mysterious healing foods in ancient history was hidden inside a tiny black seed? For centuries, black seed carried a reputation unlike almost any other natural substance in the biblical and Middle Eastern world. Ancient healers valued it deeply. Traders transported it across empires. Families stored it carefully for survival and recovery, and despite its tiny size, its reputation became legendary. This changes everything. Black seed, sometimes called black cumin, was associated with protection, resilience, and restoration. Ancient people used it during periods of weakness, exhaustion, and physical decline because they believed it strengthened the body in extraordinary ways. Some traditions even described it as a seed connected to nearly limitless healing potential. Now think about that for a moment. A tiny seed earning that level of reputation across multiple civilizations without modern advertising, social media, or pharmaceutical industries. Its influence survived purely through generations of human experience. Modern researchers later became fascinated by black seed because it contains natural compounds with unusually complex biological activity. Scientists continue studying its oils and active components today, trying to understand why ancient cultures respected it so intensely. Few people still know this. In ancient times, black seed oil was sometimes applied externally and consumed internally, making it one of the most versatile natural substances of its era. To many communities, it represented preparation against uncertainty, something stored not because life was easy, but because survival was unpredictable. Now pause for a second. Ancient civilizations constantly faced famine, disease, migration, and war. They did not keep useless foods alive for thousands of years. If something survived generation after generation, there was usually a reason, and black seed survived. But surprisingly, the next biblical food on this list was even more essential for civilization itself. Entire nations depended on it daily. Without it, survival became almost impossible. And this is where things become truly fascinating. Imagine a world where the survival of entire civilizations depended on a single grain. Long before supermarkets and industrial farming existed, barley became one of the foundations of life itself. In biblical times, this ancient grain fed families, supported armies, and sustained communities through famine, drought, and uncertainty. Without it, survival became fragile. But barley was more than simple food. Ancient cultures viewed it as security. Harvest seasons determined whether villages would prosper or collapse, and barley often became the difference between strength and desperation. It was affordable, reliable, and capable of growing in difficult conditions where other crops struggled to survive. This changes everything. Unlike many modern processed grains stripped of nutrients, ancient barley remained dense, filling, and deeply nourishing. People consumed it daily because it provided lasting energy for physical labor, travel, and endurance. Farmers worked entire days under extreme heat, fueled by simple barley meals. Now pause for a second. Modern society often ignores foods that ancient civilizations considered essential. Yet barley survived thousands of years because it consistently delivered what people needed most: stability and survival. And modern science later uncovered something fascinating. Barley contains fiber and plant compounds associated with digestive support, steady energy, and metabolic balance. Ancient people did not understand blood sugar or cholesterol, but they clearly recognized which foods helped maintain strength over time. Few people still realize this. In some ancient regions, barley became so important that it was used almost like currency. Entire economies depended on successful harvests. A failed barley season could trigger hunger, migration, and instability across entire populations. That alone reveals how powerful this grain truly was. But the next biblical food carried a different kind of power. It became associated with endurance, humility, and survival, during some of history's harshest conditions. And surprisingly, it still remains one of the most underestimated foods in the modern world. And this is where the story takes another unexpected turn. What kind of food could feed entire generations during times of hardship and still remain one of the oldest survival foods on Earth? Lentils may look simple today, but in the ancient biblical world, they represented nourishment, endurance, and resilience during uncertain times. Families stored them carefully. Travelers carried them across long distances. And during famine, lentils often became one of the few reliable food sources people could depend on. This was never supposed to be forgotten. Unlike delicate foods that spoiled quickly, lentils could last for long periods while still providing dense nutrition. Ancient societies valued this deeply because survival often depended on preparation. In a dangerous and unpredictable world, foods that stored well became priceless, and lentils did more than simply fill the stomach. Modern science now shows that lentils contain plant protein, fiber, minerals, and nutrients capable of supporting energy and long-term health. Ancient people had no scientific explanations for this, but they repeatedly observed that lentils sustained strength during physically demanding conditions. Now think about that. One of the oldest foods in human history continues to remain part of diets around the world today. Very few foods survive thousands of years unless they consistently provide real value. Few people still know this. In ancient traditions, lentils also became connected to humility and simplicity. They were not luxurious foods reserved for kings. They were foods that kept ordinary people alive, and sometimes the most powerful survival foods are the simplest ones. But here's where things become truly interesting. Many modern diets prioritize artificial energy sources filled with chemicals and extreme processing, while ancient civilizations built endurance using basic natural foods like lentils. The contrast is almost shocking. Now pause for a second. The people of the ancient world understood something modern society often forgets. Survival depends more on nourishment than appearance. Foods did not need fancy packaging to be powerful, and yet, despite everything we've explored so far, the final biblical food on this list became one of the greatest symbols of vitality, renewal, celebration, and abundance in ancient history, and its story may be the most fascinating of all. Imagine a fruit so deeply connected to human history that entire civilizations built traditions, celebrations, and sacred rituals around it. Grapes were never viewed as ordinary food in the biblical world. They symbolized life, abundance, renewal, and prosperity. Vineyards represented stability, harvests represented survival, and the vine itself became one of the most enduring symbols of strength and continuity across generations. But beneath that symbolism was something even more important. Grapes provided hydration, nourishment, and energy in regions where survival often depended on natural food sources capable of enduring harsh climates. Ancient people consumed them fresh, dried, and preserved because they understood their value in daily life. This changes everything. Modern science now reveals that grapes contain powerful natural compounds and antioxidants that researchers continue studying for their protective effects on the body. What ancient civilizations respected through observation is now being examined inside laboratories around the world, and perhaps that should make us stop and think. How many ancient foods were dismissed as primitive, only for modern science to later confirm their remarkable properties? Few people still ask that question. Now pause for a second. Throughout this journey, we explored foods connected to survival, healing, endurance, and restoration. Honey, garlic, olive oil, dates, figs, pomegranates, black seed, barley, lentils, and finally grapes. Different foods, different stories, yet they all share one powerful connection. They survived thousands of years because human beings repeatedly experienced their value. That alone is extraordinary. Ancient civilizations did not preserve these foods by accident. They carried them through wars, migrations, famines, and collapsing empires because they believed these foods helped sustain life itself. And maybe the biggest lesson hidden inside all of this is surprisingly simple. The modern world constantly searches for complex solutions, while many ancient societies relied on natural foods, balance, and wisdom passed from generation to generation. Perhaps some of the answers people seek today were never truly lost, only forgotten. This was never supposed to be forgotten. If this journey changed the way you see ancient foods and hidden wisdom, leave a comment sharing which biblical food surprised you the most. And remember, sometimes the oldest knowledge survives because it still matters, and this is only the beginning.